So we make sure we leave plenty of time for Tyler and crew. So first of all, welcome. Glad everyone could make it today on Tuesday in the middle of the day. So that's awesome. We are going to do a leadership session today. So hopefully, according to Tyler, this is going to be amazing. So we're going to jump in here real quickly. This is leadership development and basically just a panel discussion on lessons learned during the pandemic. And so we have all now experienced what it's like to lead through a pandemic, and we know how much fun that can be. And so I'm going to turn it over to Tyler Vance, our friend from Life.Church. Hello, Tyler. And Tyler is going to introduce David and Tim, and we will get started. When we are done here, we will jump back, and then we'll jump into our small groups. So right after this, just hang tight. We'll jump into our small group time when we're done. And if you guys have questions, you guys can use the chat for that. So you can drop questions there in the chat. We'll be moderating that. And as there's time at the end, the questions that bubble up, we'll just try to get those answered as they come in. So if you guys will do that, Tyler, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Scott Miller. Anyways, hey, today, what I wanted to break through is, man, just give the opportunity for an open dialogue discussion. And so what I expect to see today is a chat going crazy. If you're joining us live, if you're watching it recorded, thanks for jumping in. Hope you get something out of it as well. I know you will. But I've got two incredibly gifted, seasoned leaders in when it comes to church technology. And obviously, we all lead in different contexts. Our organizations have different representations of what God is doing and what God has called us to do. And David Russell with Church of the Highlands and Tim Peterson with Potter's House, or Father's House, sorry, both come from different representations of what church looks like, both almost from different coasts. And I believe that today you'll learn something incredibly valuable from each of them. But I also want you to know that there's very few times where you just get unfettered access to these guys in particular. And so use the opportunity to ask them questions, to dig into what God is doing in their lives and in their ministries as they've led through things. So I'll get started with that. If you don't know me, my name is Tyler Vance. I lead the IT teams at Life.Church and have been at Life.Church for 13 years. David Russell is the IT tech guru, the digital director at Church of the Highlands, and he has been there for 10 years. And Tim Peterson is the IT manager for the Father's House, and he comes with 15 years of church technology leadership with him. And so not a year into this kind of pandemic crew, but we're all a year into a pandemic. So Tim, would you kick us off and just kind of let us know what your year has been like? Obviously, you have more than just a virus that you've dealt with. Would you kind of break down some of the other leadership challenges your church has faced?
Yeah, it has been an interesting year, I'm sure, as all of us can attest to. We're in Vacaville, California. For those who don't know where that is, that's just north of the Bay Area. So we had, pandemic, and then on top of that, I'm sure everybody sees in the news all the fires. California's burning, and we have pretty close up in the hills here, right? And a lot of our church members were affected. Quite a few homes lost. So that happened all right in the middle. So it's been a pretty intense year, pretty rough, but it's also been a really good year of opportunity to grow, to see a lot of growth in our teams and all that comes with that. So.
Awesome. And David, Dr. Russell, as I like to call him, and fair warning, I will make up facts about him throughout the time together, and it'll be up to you to decide what's real. Yeah,
very, very natural part of our friendship.
Yeah, it's elusive. How's the year been for you at Church of the Highlands?
Yeah, so like most, it's been we've got to figure this out, right? I mean, it's a problem, and that in a global sense, obviously, and then it fueled a lot of interesting issues here in the ministry context. We're in Birmingham, Alabama, and so we were, a month or two behind kind of the Northeast. They got hit, so we had a little bit of time to prep and figure some things out, but it got real very fast here, and even on a personal level, know several people who are impacted by it. Of course, our prayer is that people stay safe and that God's healing's with us all. But really, when we started this thing, I felt like there were leaders who were kind of looking at it, two ways. One was, big problem. What do we do? Hair on fire. And then the other leaders were saying, hey, this is an opportunity. And I really felt that word very strongly in my own heart. Right at the beginning of this thing is like, I also serve as our campus pastor here. So I kind of had a connection to the ministry component. And so it just kind of gave me this sense of, man, this is about to happen, and we've got to be, ready for it. In some ways, I was kind of feeling like maybe we weren't that well positioned for it. But then the more I was talking to some other churches and pastors and leaders, there were a lot of churches who were really behind and really weren't really ready for this. But what I saw was really a beautiful thing, because so many churches just decided, hey, let's go online. Some of them didn't even have video cameras, in their auditoriums at all. And now all of a sudden they're catching up and able to do, what we've done for years. They're at our level of quality, just, overnight, because they saw the focus that needed to happen. And so of course my prayer is that a lot of that stays. But yeah, like many, it was a tough deal, but that word opportunities just stuck with us all year long. And those opportunities keep coming. And we're just doing our level best here to seize them as best we can.
Very good. I want to jump in to one of the things that Tim, David, and I talked about just in a pre-conversation to us getting together today. And it's, David, you talk about opportunity, and the opportunity amongst our teams has been greater than it's ever been. Most of our churches or organizations are looking to technology more than they ever have, but our staffing also hasn't been increased, right? Church budgets are also going down and decreasing at the same time. And so we live in conflict or in constraint. And so one of the things that David, I think you talked about, and Tim, you talk about just beautifully, and I'd love to hear you guys process this out loud, so I'm not the only one that's gotten to hear it, but it's the idea of the authority you have to sit at the table where decisions are made so that you aren't overwhelmed, and then the posture that you have to get there. And so would you guys just kind of begin to talk through that? And I know that there's probably people that are listening today that you feel like decisions are being made on your behalf. And I just want you to listen up to what these two guys, which are veterans, have to say about it.
Sure. Yeah. Tim, I guess I'll kick it off and then yield to you. But, I think one of the things that God kind of began stirring in my heart in the beginning of this was that those constraints that Tyler mentioned, they're very real. And yet, if we can apply some creativity, or if we just change, really it's even a perspective thing, right? It's sort of like, is this an opportunity, or, the end of the world? I mean, you kind of pick one path or the other, and then you kind of live in that. And so I think the same is true as leaders, in that a lot of times, we find ourselves as technologists in a position of leadership and also a position of authority. But those two things aren't always inextricably, in the same camp. I mean, they don't, one can happen without the other, and vice versa. And I think what I'm kind of began learning this year, just for me personally, so honestly, if this doesn't impact anybody else, even on this call, I'm really speaking out of just what's going on in my own heart personally, but I hope it helps you, is that, I think technologists sometimes run down the slippery slope of, we are in the position we're in or have the platform we have because of what we know or what we can do. And sometimes we bank on that, and that becomes our kind of default method of operating. And we operate more out of a knowledge, sense of things. And so even our leadership and even our authority with others and decision makers in the church, we're going to depend on that. We know how to do it, kind of a thing. Well, the problem with that is that it doesn't exercise our faith. it doesn't take into account what God's mantle might be on our lives as leaders. And so one of the things I've really been working hard at this year is to not bank on the things I know. Don't just walk into a room with just solving a problem. Understand the heart of the issue, and instead try and ask God to help me look at this problem, not just through the eyes of what can technology do. Step much further back. Let's look at the ministry opportunity that's in front of us. Maybe technology is not even the solution to this problem in this case. We might need to be talking to some of our ministry teams, or partnering more closely with people who are in the sort of more ministry or campus roles, or church, ministry specific roles, and having conversations with them and helping them see that we also can see ministry. In fact, this year we've been on the front lines of ministry like never before. This was not a behind the scenes year for technologists. This was a front of house, lead the charge, help us figure it out year for us. And so I hope in that context you've been able to shine in your environments, but also for me, it was just a lesson on, man, God's given us an authority. And I was just challenged to this year grow closer to God, not let the distraction of all this cause me not to invest right in my daily disciplines with the Lord. I know it sounds super simple and maybe Christianity 101 for some of you, but don't scoff at it. I needed this reminder for me personally, and in my own leadership, that I couldn't have made it through this year without depending on God. Like there were moments, and especially in April, May, June, where it's like, God, I don't have this. Most days I feel like I got it. I don't have this. And it actually put me in such a posture of humility that it then began helping every other conversation I had, because I wasn't approaching it just out of this wealth of knowledge that I could always depend on. I had to rethink everything. And so for me anyway, that was a helpful thing. And I know, and I can relate because I know other technologists who kind of get in that same camp. And it's honestly, it can be a pride. It can be something we carry that we're really not meant to carry. And we need to be reminded sometimes that, man, at the end of the day, the gifts we have, God's given us, the knowledge we have, the passion for technology we have was given to us by God. And we get the privilege of operating those gifts in the context of ministry. I know some of you may be volunteers, some of you may be paid. And if you're paid out of the faithfulness of the givers of your church, those who believe enough in the mission and vision of your church to invest, their gifts to God. And that's how you're paid. And so what a privilege that this year's been. So I know for me, just understanding that I have an authority, and it's not based on what I know, but it's actually given to me by God. And by the way, it can be stretched. It can be raised. It can be improved. It's not just something that you have or I don't. It's something that we have. And I think we need to cultivate our authority and not just look at it from our authoritativeness around technology, but instead, let's also exercise our spiritual authority. Let's walk into meetings. Sometimes you feel frustrated because the senior pastor is maybe not seeing where you're going from, but maybe you're not seeing where he's going. And it could simply be that your eyes need to be open. But as you then describe some things under the authority of the Holy Spirit and working in the authority of the Holy Spirit, now your senior pastor or those senior leaders can see what you're talking about and make the connection. And all of a sudden you get the way seems paved for you, and it's really no different than where you were before, except that you've grown closer to God. As we draw near to God, God draws near to us. And as that happens, there's a humbling that takes place in that. And so for me, that's been this year. It's been humbling. It's been, checking myself in the simplest of things, making sure I'm investing the right time daily with the Lord. At first thing in the morning, I'm in the Bible. I'm in worship. I'm in prayer, and I have to take that time right at the beginning to make sure that as I go through the day, I'm not depending on myself, but I'm depending on God. So if that's where to help somebody, I certainly hope it does, and I'll yield to Tim.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think the two words you mentioned there, David, were the opportunity and creativity. Those are just sum up, I think, really perfectly what 2020 can and should be for us as in whatever leadership role that we have. I know for us here in the Father's house, it's we have a senior pastor who if he's just sitting doing the same thing, he doesn't feel like he's getting his job done. So what that can look like for the staff is constant change. So especially during a pandemic when nobody really knows, here we are in California, it feels like regulations that are being handed down are changing every other week. And that can just change what church likes on a week-to-week basis. Are we meeting in person? Are we doing church out on the lawn? Are we doing inside with certain percent capacity? Are we back? Now we're back to, online, whatever that looks like. And I'm sure that that's probably familiar for some out there. And there can be a lot of opportunity just to kind of sit that out and say, okay, or even for friction, especially in leading just the small team that I have, a lot of just feeling comes up of, hey, why are we constantly changing these things? And why this and why that? And really it can lead to, instead of taking advantage of the opportunity, instead of looking for creativity, we can kind of pull back and think just keeping ourselves inside of a box. And I think this year really, here we all are, we're going through something that we haven't ever seen probably in the history of the world. I don't know. And it's an opportunity to really look at the problem and tried out things that we've never tried before. The one thing that I constantly am challenged of is, I feel like, I think it's John Maxwell says, leadership is influence. And I never want to be that guy who just goes into a room, decisions are being made, and just says no, just simply for the fact of that's just the way we've always done it, or that looking at the pieces I have in my hand, whether that's my budget or my team, or you name the resources, but saying I'm short on all these resources, so I just have to say no. But instead, trying to find a way to yes. I think that's really kind of sums up what it's been for us here, is just trying in each opportunity. Yes, there's been frustrating moments, and there's been times where you feel like even in your family you're being stretched because of whether that looks of time being away from the family or different things. But the fruit that we've seen out of it is incredible. Being able, just thinking this year with our team as a church, we've always last, 5-6 years, we've done okay with just having an online presence, but it never was by any means a primary focus. Everyone pretty much met, and as far as the staff goes, we all worked inside of very specific physical locations, not really working offsite. And then all of a sudden to switch and pivot, I think we did an amazing job as a team, just pulling together. And all of a sudden, all this focus comes, and it's going into this online product, especially those first few months when everything was shut down. And seeing the fruit that came out of that, the stories that we've heard, and the success that we really saw, and people growing in their roles. So anyway, kind of just to put a bow on that, I think for moving forward, it's a lesson for me of what can happen when you say yes, when you take advantage of the opportunity, when you think creatively, when you pull yourself outside of that box and don't allow yourself to be limited by the resources you see in your hand at the moment. And it's stretching for sure. It's big time.
Tim, I'm gonna jump back into that thought because you took my mind to a different place. But real quick, we got a question from Micah Klassen who says, and I think Dr. Russell, you can answer this from your faith journal. What's an example of a time that you exercised faith in making IT decisions? Can you talk through that?
Absolutely. No, I think it's a great question, Micah. Thanks so much for asking that. It's, for me, I think it sort of goes back to what I was saying earlier. Because God's gifted us, we can really operate sometimes a little bit out of kind of what we know. And it can be a day-to-day thing. So I'm going to give you a general answer and then specific. And so in a general sense, what I find is I could come in and I could operate maybe most days. In fact, once this year got into a rhythm, I could easily have defaulted back into most days coming in and really just making it happen. And that's not to take God completely out of the equation. He made me who I am, but in a sense, I wouldn't be depending on him. And so what we have to be sure we're doing is putting God first every day, so that as we're operating and making decisions, it's not that I have to pray over every decision. It's that I bathe everything in sort of the context of
Don't
faith,
get crazy.
Yeah.
Don't get crazy now.
So to me, that's kind of in a general sense. I think we want to be close to God because our decisions will be better the closer we are to God. Like the more of that relationship we have, the more we're going to just naturally operate out of His giftings and His anointing over our work. But also very specifically, when we have very critical decisions to make, I elevate all that even more. Hiring is probably the most important decision I make. Who's on this team and how they're going to join with us in the mission of reaching people for Jesus in our area. And I'm telling you, it's always been a core conviction of mine that people, even though they're technologists, that they understand that this is ministry. As we were talking on the call a little bit ago with Tim, Tyler, and I, and Tim was just talking about, like, sometimes we got to remember, I'm giving him this his dog because it's his, but man, this is ministry. Like, we can't forget this is ministry. And so for me, as it relates to, say, hiring decisions, man, not only am I personally praying over those hiring decisions, but I'm really focused very much in not just asking about competencies, which we need, right? They're necessary, but about calling as well. And I've talked to so many people who are extremely competent, and I promise you, I want them on our team. I'd love to have them on the team, but they don't understand calling, or they don't express, and they don't show me in that interview process that they're called to ministry. And it's like, oh, well, and I get the opposite. I get people who are called to ministry, but they're not competent. Well, I was like, well, that's wonderful. And you may have some place, some expression ministry somewhere you need to get into, but it's not IT. And so that's certainly a more practical example of where I even take those things up a notch. I'm praying. In fact, depending on the role, I'll even meet that individual's spouse, because their faith impacts, their perspective impacts so much of what happens here. And so we hope we don't have late nights. We hope we don't have people working extended hours or some tough circumstances that people have to walk through, but it happens. And how is that person's spouse going to react when we're walking through some of those things? So I would say, again, it does kind of bathe everything. And I think that's just why I think we need to be close to God all the time, and not operating out of our own, just depending on our own self, which, by the way, is the quickest way to burn out anyway. But let's really depend on God. But then also in some very specific and important cases, let's pray first. Let's stop. Let's take a moment before we even have the discussion as a team about whether we should do this. We're talking about building an app next year for something, and it's such a spiritual thing. I can almost feel the warfare around even the conversations, And so it's like, man, we gotta ask the Holy Spirit to go before us, so that all those quarrels and conflicts, that James talks about, that divisiveness that the enemy's trying to get at us, we've got to resist the devil, and he will flee from us. We might have to actively resist the devil off stuff that's going on in technology. And the very next part of that is draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. And so to me, it's a two-part process where we have to kind of say, resist the enemy and then the way of distraction and the things of the world that might press in. We also have to embrace what God wants to do, get close to him. And if it is certainly a big, IT decision, let's take that to the next level and bathe it in prayer. And if you're having team meetings and they're not like starting off in prayer, I'm not saying every meeting has to, but we have, 2 team meetings a week here, and both those, start in prayer. Well, one starts in prayer, one ends in prayer, but same difference. It's like, man, if we're not going there as a team spiritually together, then man, we're missing it. If all we're doing is crossing T's, dotting I's, rebooting, servers and, patching stuff and answering tickets, like, man, we're missing it. That's good. That's the things we need to do. We're hired to do responsibilities, but I guarantee you, your senior pastor would love it if you grew closer to God. I guarantee you, because it's going to make everything else better. All those other things will work either way. But our closeness with the Lord is going to be paramount in that process. So sorry, I went very long on that.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Because it's a good reminder, right? It's I don't know. You guys have probably been in situations where, man, you got that piece of equipment and you prayed over it, right? And you're laughing, but like,
yeah.
I want to tell you, there's been some weekends at Life.Church that have happened by the hand of the Lord on a piece of gear that should have been dead.
Yes.
And it's a great reminder that what we do is spiritual. We are not a tech company for a reason, because we have a purpose that's higher than that. So that'll That'll preach, Dr. Russell. Tim, one of the things that you were talking through, and I just want to go back to it, and I want to quote actually David, but Tim, you brought out the most of this in our last conversation. And this is a quote: "If you're not careful, your organization will outgrow you." And I want you to stop for a second and think about that. If you're not careful, your organization will outgrow you. And I would actually question today, has your organization in the year 2020 outgrown the capacity of leadership that you've given it? So as we look at influence, you hear words like opportunity, as you hear words that seem life-giving and seem full of possibility, there's a high potential that you could actually also be on the other side of that, where you don't feel any of that. You feel overwhelmed. You feel working long hours. You feel like there's not enough in the day in order to make that happen. And Tim, I'd love for you to just speak into how in your time in leadership and your time in serving the local church, how have you navigated that? And how have you gotten to a place to elevate beyond that?
Yeah. I think the first thing that's just off the bat is realizing that you are in ministry, just like what David was talking about. I don't know, over the years that I've been working in the church, if I probably would be burnt out and bitter if I hadn't viewed my role, my technical role, as ministry. It would be pretty crazy to hire a worship pastor just because they can play. We expect that they also have a heart for ministry. Same thing with like a senior pastor, just because they can speak, but for some reason in the more technical roles, in your IT and your finance and different areas, we kind of just tend to think of, okay, what are the skills you have, but then not the spiritual aspect to it. And I think it's so vital, especially as you're leading a team, to realize that you've been called to ministry, that you're there for something more than to ones and zeros and a paycheck. And I think especially that helps shape then the experience of, like, okay, so this pandemic, for example, that helped shape my mindset during the long hours, during the inconsistencies, during the times when leadership is asking more than you think is fair, or you're being presented with a problem that you're like, I've never gone down this road before. How am I supposed to know? And everyone you would want to reach out to, they're also going through the same stretching. And I think it's huge too. Throughout just the last 9 months, we've had plenty of opportunities where our team is kind of like just getting banana shape, or those opportunities arise, and it changes how you lead those conversations, because you bring them back to, okay, but we're doing this for people. We're not doing this just because we were asked to by our boss or whoever it is that's calling the shots. It's we're doing this because there's people out there who are living in levels of isolation that we've never seen before. We're talking as a team internally about the fact that, yeah, there's a pandemic going on, but there's also record rates of suicide and abuse and addiction, and the amazing opportunity that we have to, one thing we were talking about before was, as in a technical role in IT, we've always, you can draw the line of, okay, my work that I put in here at the church, I can see it influencing people, but it's indirect, right? And the really cool thing about a pandemic like this is you're literally seeing like how your role, your ministry is directly influencing people's lives on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. And I think reminding yourself of that, reminding your team of that. So anyway, coming back to the original question, I think that's, for me, has been the key, not just during that pandemic. I'm thankful that the leaders who spoke into my life at the time when I was just coming up and starting really hit that home, and it's just stuck with me over the years. And I think it really helps to to frame that mindset.
I love that, man. One of the things that, as you're talking, just the concept and no matter what seat you sit in, you've got to navigate through this. There are times where we as team members have high trust in our organization and our leadership. And there are times when we have low trust, or times when we have low trust in our leadership above us or the organization that we serve in, right? You're probably going to navigate through seasons where it's like, man, they value what I do. They heard what I said. They know that I'm working hard. And then there's going to be seasons where you feel like, man, they don't know that I'm working hard. They don't know the long hours. They don't know what I'm doing. They keep asking for more and nobody cares. And so I would just ask that you find yourself more often in a place of trusting your organization. And if there's not trust, I'm actually, if you were a team member of mine, I'd tell you it's your responsibility to pull that. Because sometimes your leader just doesn't know what you're feeling or what you're navigating or what you're going through. Sometimes you have to step out and say it out loud. Sometimes you have to create the clarity of the context of, you know what, I know that you need a computer ordered, but I've got these 10 other things to do today. And if they knew that you had the 10 other things to do, they would have empathy towards you. You have to trust that, but you also have to lead up and say, these are the 10 other things I have to do. They can't have empathy for something they don't understand. So I'm going to tell you, as a leader, there are places where you are actually in control of building trust or eroding trust in your own organization in the seat that you sit in. And this has been a year as we've had to increase the margin that you would have had to flux, and the margin that you would have had to put that trust bucket in is probably gone. And you're probably finding yourself in either bucket, depending on whatever day you walk into the office. And so just a reminder for you, you have the opportunity to build that. You have the opportunity to grow that. It is actually your responsibility first, not your leaders first. But your leaders do need to respond to that. And so you're also, if you're in an organization where your leader isn't responding to that, it might be a good sign that you need to find another organization to serve in before your relationship, as David said and Tim said, your relationship with God and the way that you serve is impacted in such a negative way that it overtakes what you're doing. So Chris Adams says, what are some examples of things you do to develop your team's spiritual health?
I can jump in.
Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
For us, it comes down to I'm really making sure, keeping up on them being involved, that we're not just coming in and just, that we from day one, when people join the team, we really hit home the expectation that they are like, if you're on staff at the Father's house, you're a leader. Everyone's told that. That's just something that we continually talk. That's from the top down. And so a lot of it comes down to just reiterating that, making sure that people are involved. So here we do small groups, the weekly services and events. And in this case, a lot of times remote stuff. We continually check up on, make sure that people they're not just coming in and just doing a job, but they are involved spiritually in the life of the church. And you can always, and then that also becomes a red flag of having almost an intervention, if you will. If you notice somebody who's just checked out in that regard, it's a really great opportunity for us just to come in and say, hey, what's going on? What can we do? Where are you at in life? Because it's an indicator that something slipped, that they're in their life, and they just need to check up. And so that's kind of what it looks like in our team.
It's awesome, Tim.
I would go ahead, Dr. Russell, and then I've got a thought.
Okay.
No,
Yeah.
Go ahead, and then I've got a thought.
Yeah, a couple of things we do here at Highlands, and then even specifically on our team. much like Tim said, same almost verbatim language. I mean, if you're on this team, you're a leader, and so there's a lot that goes into even becoming on this team. Obviously, that helps in that process. That we know we have people who are where they need to be with the Lord, and self-starters, and understand how to cultivate a personal relationship with Jesus. But also they're at a place where they're leading others to do the same. So they're leading small groups and serving as they can on Dream Team. We don't require that necessarily, but we do ask our team members to lead groups. And then we have one-on-one meetings, which are extremely important. Every single person in the technology areas of our church have one-on-one meetings with the person that leads them. And so without fail, and it's not a situation where it's like, well, do we have anything to talk about? So let's not meet. There's one question that gets asked every week at the beginning of that meeting that will always be relevant, even if you're caught up on everything else. The question is, how are you doing? And so I'm meeting with the managers that lead the teams that I have the privilege of serving, and that's the first question I start with those managers. And I know that they're having that same conversation with their team members and on down. And so the reality for us is, so like Tim said, you have to kind of be in a place where you can observe, what's going on. People can hide stuff, man. I know, because I used to hide stuff. So it's like, until you understand accountability in your Christian relationship, it's not hard. And so they can come in every day, go through the motions, and everything it looks like everything's okay. But if you don't have some connection with them, some ability to ask, and in an environment where they can safely do it. I mean, I've had so many conversations this year where people have been brought to tears sitting on that couch right over there, and it's like, because that's just the kind of year it is. But it's not. You don't get that if I'm asking them whether their tasks are complete. You get that when you ask them how they're doing. How's your family? How are your kids? What's going on? What's the latest? How can we help? How can we, serve you? How can I pray for you? And so anyway, that's critical. And then the only other thing I'll say real practical is we do make financial allowance for people to purchase resources, buy things that help, books and things like that help them grow. And so a lot of times I'll be in conversation with a team member, maybe a coaching moment or something like that. I'll prescribe a certain book, a certain reading plan through YouVersion or something for them, just to kind of help. And so it's just, I really think you do not have to have the title of pastor to pastor. You have to understand you're in the position of leadership, what's put you in the spiritual leadership over your team, in addition to all the other things. And if you're not taking that seriously, then your team's going to suffer the consequences of you not taking it seriously. So if you're the spiritual leader, then first of all, you got to be right. You got to be in good shape, but you got to lead them in that same way. So you are setting the example with the words you say. Those are as much about cultivating the good, results in the good fruit in their own lives by them seeing the good fruit, in your life. But there's definitely some practical stuff there that can be done too, to just make sure people have, opportunities to grow and that they're not stuck, so.
Yeah, thank you. I don't have anything to add to that, just one other practical way. So I want to clarify that, because I can't top Dr. Russell, and his YouVersion sponsorship is not paid, just for clarity.
Looking for that check, still looking.
Yeah. You keep looking for it. Stewardship matters. And
that's what they always say.
Yeah. I would say that we always share practical stories of impact. And so even just something I shared with the team yesterday about a tool that we put out in our organization to care and follow up with people every 90 days during this season, and a Facebook message from a campus in Fort Smith, Arkansas. Just a random message I saw when I shared it back with the team, because it was a direct revelation of the product that they had put in place for ministry to happen. And so if we're not building, like Tim said, if we're not building the bridge between what we do, setting most likely in a basement, not everyone has a nice window office there, Dr. Russell. And
it's not mine. I've borrowed it from someone.
Yeah, I know. and the actual ministry that's happening, it's so much harder to show up every day. Because let me tell you, if you're doing technology in a church because you love technology and not because you love the church, you're an idiot. Go do it in a place that pays you a ton of money to just do technology. That's everyone that is a part of that would laugh at that, right? And so, anyways, hey, a couple fun things I want to hit for you guys, just because I love your thoughts, and I want to make sure that that if you were in a church of 250, what is the thing that you'd be doing this year?
I'll jump in. I mean, I would, first of all, I would be having a lot of fun. That environment sounds fantastic. I think a lot of times we tend to get caught in a comparison trap when we're looking at other churches, and we see resources that they have, and they're like, well, of course, if I had that, I could do what they were doing. Honestly, let me just speak really candidly. Their constraints can be such a blessing. And when some certain constraints are lifted, sometimes it's just easy to take it for granted. And so the reality is that with technology, and this is one of the things I mentioned about the streaming thing, it blew my mind that we had churches that went from 0 to 100 miles an hour in online ministry because they wanted to. They made it a focus. The technology, they're at 4K. They're probably broadcasting. We're still at 720p. Like, they're probably broadcasting at a higher. I mean, just things like that. I know it sounds silly, but the reality is if you want something and you need to get there, money's not the way to do it. Okay, use the right portion of your brain to tackle that problem with what you have. Ask God to bless it. I'm telling you, God anoints all of us in every situation. Look at the Bible. So many of who God used came from the humblest of circumstances. It was the wealthy people were walking away from Jesus saying, we can't even go that way, right? It was the humblest of people, the people who had the most issues, the people who had the least, who God wanted to use the most and had the most impact. And so that in ministry, that's we have to reconnect with that. And so I would just say, certainly, if I were in that position, I wouldn't be paying any attention to what the church down the street is doing better than me. I would literally focus on what we have, the people who are around us. I would probably be having I would probably be in 50% meetings about technology and 50% meetings about ministry. Like, not even, I'm just a fly on the wall in a room with like our small groups person or our kids team. And I'm just like, I'm walking through that hall on Sunday morning, just maybe watching the way people check in, or how are we doing this? I want to see, I would be way more involved on that side of things and just looking for opportunities. And then I could say, you know what, I've got an idea that might help you make that line go faster. Nothing to do with technology. I just came up with something. What if we, and that sounds like an environment where I would have an immense amount of fun. I mean, that there are endless opportunities for improvement there. And anyway, so long answer again. But
I gotta jump in on that, because that's the first thing that came to my mind was stop, or not that everyone's doing this, but don't compare. That whole idea is so debilitating. It holds you back. And I will say
and it never stops. I mean, even when you have what you think you want, I've gotten there multiple times in my career, in my ministry career, where I thought, oh, now we've got this, we can do that. It's just looking at so when you create a habit like that, it's only going to continue. And as God does bless your ministry, you're going to just keep looking outside. And Tyler, largest church in America, could easily look outside his window and compare to, Google or whoever else. And that's not what God's called us to do. In fact, it only divides the church. Sorry, Tim, didn't mean to interrupt. My bad.
No, you hit it right on the head. It does continue. I've seen it for me personally, in that's really the realization I had. I'm like, all along, I can look back as the budget's increased, as we've gone from one person to 2, 3, 4, as your personnel increases, then you just have the same problem if you're comparing, because you're just comparing to a bigger fish in a bigger pond with who are probably meeting people that you don't need to meet in your community. You know, all these different factors, instead of stepping back and just looking at, okay, what do I have in my hand? What can we do right now? And exercising that creativity. It will limit what you're doing if you're comparing.
It sounds like your organization could outgrow you based just on perspective of how you look at the resources God has allowed you to steward in your hand. Is that?
Yeah.
I don't want to jump to any conclusions. I just want to make sure it's clear. And I would actually add to your guys' point, please stop looking at the slow cruise ship and going, man, that would be so fun to get on. Everyone on the cruise ship is looking at the speedboat going, that would be so fun to get on. Just think about that for a second.
Yep.
I'm with you guys. It sounds like a lot of fun. In fact, what I would ask is that the churches that don't have, that are the, man, we started streaming like 3 months ago. Embrace the place that you have in the community to be iterative, to test an idea, to move quickly, to teach the rest of us things that, for me to iterate an idea takes more resource, more time, more energy than you. The value is in you being able to teach me about the iterative idea, right? And that is not a size thing. That's not a me, you thing. I mean, that is genuinely, we're all going to find ourselves in different pockets and different places where we can collectively move the church and the mission of the church forward. If we don't try and replicate what everyone else is already doing, the power is that none of us have it figured out. And so let's lean in and recognize that none of us have it figured out and help to figure out what the next generation that will come behind us looks like. And David, to your point, we will never get there comparing. Tim, to your point, we will never get there if we don't understand the ministry impact of where we're going, right? If it's just technology, then we've lost it.
That's right.
And on the whole idea of iterating too, in this season, I would be looking at when you're presented with a problem, typically our analytic, our IT brains, we like to go get the problem, come up with this amazing idea, build the entire Death Star and present it, but in the meantime, leadership's moved on and they no longer need that problem solved. I would say, what's the fastest solution you can get it out there, then iterate on it. We've been trying to do this more and more in our team. And honestly, you find that then you catch problems, you find, we didn't like to do it that way. You save time, you save money, you save headaches. One other thing I was thinking about, just in light of that question, I would also be looking at as we don't know, what does the next year look like, for example? Who knows? But one thing is I would be looking at what are the things we've just always done just because we've always done it. And what can we drop? What can we change? What can we trim off, I guess would be a good word. Just cut the fat of the things that we've done it just because we've done it. And now maybe they're no longer relevant in the next season. So those are the kind of things we're thinking through even.
Tim, one of the, if you've been around me enough, you've heard me say, just stop doing stupid things. And I think this goes back to, if you want to place a place of position or influence in your organization, you will never get there without the clarity of knowing what you do is actually what's valued. And I don't want to step on too many toes, but I also don't care. Sometimes the things that you value, no one else in your organization values, and you turn around and you go home and your spouse at the end of the day has to hear about how no one cares about how you're valued. And the reality is you're just not doing the right things. And so I just want to give you permission not to stop doing the stupid things that your organization thinks is stupid, but to do the things that maybe only you care about. Stop doing those and go do something that has a ministry impact. And I guarantee you'll get a place of influence and you'll grow in the role of technology in your organization and be able to move the gospel forward, which is really the only thing we're trying to do.
So good.
Yeah.
Sean, Ross had a question I want to hit for you guys. He said, I know that there are those struggling this year, including me. David hinted that he's been in that spot. What are strategies for working towards better health for yourself when you're in the spot of leading?
First of all, Sean, it's great. It's a phenomenal question. I noticed Chris and maybe a couple of others down kind of in the comments also just mentioned that they were related to this year, and it's been a tough year, man. It's been a tough year for all of us in many ways. And when we're in leadership, you know, I'm a husband and also a father, and so I'm leading through this. You know, leading my family through this. I'm leading my teams through this. I'm leading our small groups through this. There's a lot of people I'm responsible for. I'm leading our online campus. You know, there are people that I'm responsible for, and yet, you know, it's affecting me personally too. And I'm having to walk through the anxiety and the challenges and just the uncertainty of all of this. And so, what I would tell you first, anybody who kind of relates to that, and this has been a tough year for you, the first thing I would say is that you have to remember that God called you to the position that you're in, and you're not in that position because it's meant to overwhelm you and meant to stress you out and meant to wig you out. If those things are happening, it's probably because we just naturally start depending on ourselves. We depend on our own strengths, and we don't really cast our cares on God. The burden is not ours to carry, but why do we carry it? I don't know. It's tough. I do it sometimes too, but we have to remind ourselves who's in control of this situation. It feels out of control to the rest of us, but the closer I get to God, the more I've drawn near to him this year, the more I've just got this overwhelming sense of peace that God is in control. And so I just want to encourage you in that today, that you know that God is in control. And then at the end of the day, though, you're still leading people. So you gotta kind of get some things reordered and reprioritized in your own life while, you know, being responsible, and go into the office the next day and put that smile on your face as best you can, and you know, and be an example, lead people. And that's a challenge too. So I'll give you a couple of quick prescriptions. One, just confess to God where you are and have that moment with him. Confess to your spouse and to your accountability partner just where you are. And I'm not saying I'm maybe away from God or anything like that. I'm just saying, like, just whatever you're dealing with, whatever you're struggling with, you need to be sure God already knows it, but you need to vocalize it to him. And then you need to do the same thing with people that you trust in your life. And I think too, it might even be worth conversations with your leader at church. Once you kind of have those things, whoever you report to, if that's your pastor or senior leader, whoever, have that conversation with them, so at least they know where you're at. If they're not having those regular one-on-one health conversations, then you just initiate it. You be the one to initiate it. It's not that they don't care about you. I'm sure they do. Maybe they just need that simple, you take the initiative to let them know what's going on in your life. And then, you know, so anyway, so I think there's some things you can do there to just kind of help start that path toward healing, but realize, man, you're okay. This is not something, you don't need to step down. You don't need a sabbatical. And there are ways to continue the progress that God's called you to do there, but while also finding the right kinds of ways to increase your time with the Lord, and through conversations, get the healing that you need. And man, at the end of the day, we all need it. And ultimately the Holy Spirit will be the one, you know, who provides that, you know, for us. So
I think it takes a good dose of humility, of just walking in that daily. You know, the Bible talks about how the proud will be humbled. It's better just to start from that place of humility. I know for just me personally, pulling back the curtain a little bit, you know, I have an awesome marriage. My wife and I, we're committed to each other. But during this pandemic, you know, she found out homeschooling kids is just absolutely not her gifting. You know, I'm gone working long hours. We had moved, and we just found a lot of stress on our marriage. And so just going to, you know, my direct report here and just asking, hey, is there any resources for counseling that we had? And thankfully that's something that the church offered. I don't know, maybe you don't have that option where you're at. But we actually just went and we had quite a few sessions with the counselor during the pandemic. And I don't know, I don't know what it would look like if we hadn't done that. And I think just there's going to be moments like that. Maybe it's not that specific for you, but if you're going through stuff, taking that position of humility to go and open up. I think a lot of times when the higher we go in a role of leadership or authority, we feel like we can't have faults and we can't stumble. And that's when we usually then your stumble or your failures are going to be a lot more epic at that point. And so I just say, exactly the stuff that David was talking about, and just stay humble in talking with people about it.
Yeah, thank you guys for jumping in today. In the spirit of that, if you find yourself today in a place where you're struggling, man, I'd love to connect with you. And so here's my email. Don't sell it. If you find someone to buy it, actually let me know. It's just simply Tyler, Tyler, Vance, Vance, at Life.Church. And I would love for you to reach out to me and ask me to pray for you. I would jump on a call with you, help you out. I don't want you to be doing life alone. And the calling that Dr. Russell talked about that you have is also a place where you've been equipped. And if you've been equipped for this season and this time, God has a plan for you. And so don't forget it today. Dr. Russell, Mr. Tim, thank you very much for jumping in today. Scott, I know you're jumping in to help us lead into small group time. So thank you guys.
Thanks, everybody. It was an honor.
Yeah, same.
Thank you guys so much. Man, that was awesome. I took a lot of notes. So we get to go back and read through those later, but really, really helpful stuff. And like Tyler said, I mean, the best thing about this community, right, is that it's a community and we're all on the same team, right? We work for different churches, but we all work for the same king. We got the same boss, right? And that's awesome. And we can encourage each other, right? And so we're going to jump into small group time. And if you've got something that, man, you are wrestling with, we've always said, in church IT, right, we want to steal ideas from each other, right? But there are times when we're in a smaller group like this, where, man, there is this sense of a holy moment where we want to be able and be free to share things that are hard, right? And we want to pastor each other really well. And so, Tyler gave you his email address. You guys are going to be in a group now. We're going to go to group time. If you're not in a group that you already know about, just find one, right? Find a group and jump in it. Introduce yourself if you're new. But really, this is a time, if you are struggling, or you've got something that's just heavy on your heart, man, this is a great time to just go, hey, this is what I'm wrestling with. This is what's going on, and get wise counsel, right? And have the folks pray for you, and create relationships in these small groups. That's what we really hoped would come out of this, right? This virtual online conference thing, right? Whatever we're calling this, was that relationships would be deepened, right? So that we have relationships with people that we can reach out to and say, hey, man, I'm struggling, or hey, I had a really awesome day. I want to tell you about it, right? And so that's one of the goals. And so as we jump into this time, man, take advantage of it. That's why we do this. That's why we're here. So we're going to jump into that time right now. I think Matt's going to push some magic buttons and some things will happen, and we'll be able to jump into our groups. And then when we're done with that, we're finished for the day. So thank you guys again for that hour we just had. That was awesome. So appreciate it. And we're going to jump into groups.